a lot of people congregated. Good afternoon, everyone. It's I can see from looking at many of you and that the sun is streaming through our windows, and I just had to close the shades. It's a beautiful day for a Met Council meeting. So I will start the meeting and call it to order. This is Charlie Zelli, Council Chair, and as we all know, due to COVID-19 pandemic, this continues to be a virtual meeting. We're still in a state of emergency, and under the executive order, we'll be continuing to do this. If there is any public listening or watching, we are interested in your comments, and you may email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will respond in a timely manner. And for means of determining if we have a quorum, Liz will call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez. Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Musset. Sterner.
Here.
Bento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Zurin.
President.
And Chair Zelli.
I'm here. We have a quorum.
Moses
And I think
Okay.
we've all seen the agenda, and unless there's any objections, I will assume that it is approved, which brings us to the minutes for April 14th that were sent out in advance. And is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Bento moves approval of the minutes of the April 14th meeting.
Wolf seconds.
Thank you both. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Liz, will please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musset.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Bento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. Well, the minutes are approved, which brings us to the consent agenda. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
Moved by Ferguson.
Thank you, Chris. Second.
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none. Liz, you may call the roll.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musset.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Bento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. The consent agenda is passed. Which brings us to reports of standing committees. There is, community development has reports on the consent agenda, but next up is the Environment Committee. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We have business item 2021-91. This is an authorization to acquire real property in the vicinity of 3rd Street and Commercial Street, St. Paul. The proposed area contains a mix of former industrial buildings, rail yards, the Bruce Vento Regional Trail and Nature Sanctuary, a planned cultural and environmental interpretive center, the Walk-On TP Center, and a major bridge, the Kellogg Street Bridge, which is will be undergoing a big reconstruction project. This site contains the interceptor that conveys about half of the Twin Cities wastewater flow, the 3rd and Commercial liquid waste receiving site, which is used as a backup site when the primary liquid waste receiving site at the Metro plant is unavailable due to river flooding or maintenance or just for efficient wastewater treatment operations. The council seeks to protect this area from conflicting land uses and development in the area and is advancing efforts to secure property needed to operate, maintain, and rehabilitate wastewater infrastructure. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the acquisition of all easements and fee interests necessary for the ongoing maintenance of the 1-MS-100 interceptor sewer, the liquid waste receiving operations, and future construction to rehabilitate the interceptor and associated facilities in the vicinity of 3rd Street and Commercial Street in the great city of St. Paul and adjacent to the Bruce Vento Regional Trail and Nature Sanctuary. And I'll just finally add, Mr. Chair, that there's been a number of council members, as you know, Councilmember Lee and Lilligren and Councilmember Vento and yourself, Mr. Chair, that have been working with the Walk-On TP Center, along with our staff that have been participating in all aspects of the design of this interpretive center, which promises to be a great asset for our region. Thank you.
That is true. Thank you, Chair Lindstrom. Is there a second?
Second by Chambliss.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. Liz?
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musse.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Vento.
I'm abstaining.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion is carried.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Vento.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that the reason for my abstention is just to avoid any question regarding possible conflicts. I don't believe there are any, but rather than run the risk of people wondering, I abstained. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And Sue, I don't think you have a conflict, but I think I understand the appearance and that is a very special area. So we all appreciate, as Councilmember Lindstrom said. So, Councilmember Lindstrom, you have more.
I do. One more item, Mr. Chair. We have business item 2021-92, which requests adoption of a facility plan for the Blue Lake wastewater treatment plant. This facility plan recommends improvements to the Blue Lake wastewater treatment plant to meet capacity needs through 2050. And this is going to improve the effluent quality to meet anticipated future permit regulations and renew assets that are near the end of their service life. The facility plan was available for public review beginning at the beginning of February 2021. The virtual public hearing was conducted in March 15th, and attended by 7 folks who were not presenters or producers of the hearing. No questions were asked during the hearing, but we did get questions prior to the hearing from the Shakopee Public Works Director, and they were related to the size of the expansion, traffic, odor, and capacity. These questions were answered via email and read out loud during the public hearing. We also received some questions from the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District Administrator, and they were answered via email as well, and related to riverbank erosion, repair schedule, permitting, and groundwater use. Following adoption of this facility plan, it will be submitted to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency with an application for placement of the program on the project priority list for funding through the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund beginning next year, 2022. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members, I move that the Met Council adopt the facility plan for Blue Lake wastewater treatment plant improvements. This is MCES project number 809700 per resolution number 2021-15 attached to the business item. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Barber.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it was just pointed out to me that the resolution was not attached to the business item, and if it's okay with you, we'll have Liz share it to the screen, and then we will attach it to the business item. But I'd like people to see it before they vote.
Excellent. Whenever I see your smiling face, I thought, there's something missing here.
Something's up. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is your general counsel. Just to jump in quick, it was attached at the environmental committee. So that is what they passed, and it was clearly a piece of it. It just lost its way on the way to the council. So we just want to make sure you all are seeing it before you're voting and we don't have any questions.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Anne, for sharing it and for pointing that out. And I want everybody to get a chance to look at it. I know Councilmember Barber seconded. So if there's any discussion, questions while we're reading it, we can have Liz call the roll. Any discussions, questions? All right, go ahead, Liz.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin, Chair Zelli.
Aye. All right, that motion has carried, which I think brings us to the Management Committee. And there's Councilmember Ferguson now.
Thank you, Chair Zelli. We have 2 business items on the agenda today. The first business item is for our non-represented plan and changes to that plan. So the non-represented plan covers about 400 employees who are not covered by by the provisions of a collective bargaining agreement. The non-represented plan is reviewed on an annual basis to reflect necessary changes and update compensation. Revisions to the 2021 salary administration indicates a 2% general increase for represented employees and either a step movement or a performance-based increase depending on where an employee sits on the compensation grid. This increase is within the 2021 adopted operating budget and is consistent with the parameters established by the Management Committee for represented bargaining units. The proposed action is that, and this item has been reviewed by and approved by the Management Committee. Mr. Chair, I move that the Management Committee approves non-represented plan changes effective December 26, 2020, incorporating the revision summarized in the business item.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Johnson seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there any discussion, questions? If not, Liz, you may call the roll. I see Councilmember Alex Ingebrigtsen is here, so we should start at the top of the alphabet.
Atlas Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Zurin's an aye, and I also want to say that I was an aye on the last business item. Unfortunately, my bandwidth, I lost it for just a short period of time. Apologies.
okay. And Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. Councilmember Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Second business item is business item 2021-93. That is the Law Enforcement Labor Services LELS Local 432 Full-Time Police Force. Metropolitan Council Labor Agreement with Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 432 expired on December 31st, 2020. The union represents 108 full-time police officers who work for Metro Transit Police Department. The union reached a tentative agreement on March 25th, 2021, which was ratified by membership on April 7th, 2021. Highlights of the agreement include a 3-year contract effective January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2023, a 2% general wage increase in years 1 and 2, and a 2.5% general increase in the 3rd year of the contract for all active employees. The agreement also adds clarifying language addressing officer eligibility for on-call and court time compensation. The wages and benefits negotiated in the agreement are consistent with the agreements in place with the council's other labor unions. The cost of the labor agreement was reviewed by finance and negotiated within the economic parameters established by the council. The item was reviewed and approved by the Management Committee on April 14th, 2021. It was moved by Barbara and seconded by Lee. Mr. Chair, the Management Committee would like I move the approved business item 2021-93, the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 432 agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Sterner.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. Liz, you may call the roll.
Atlas Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. Which brings us to the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2021-87, a same week item, is in regards to the travel behavior inventory. The travel behavior inventory onboard survey is conducted approximately every 5 years. It provides data necessary to assist with the regional travel modeling, transit planning, and market research, while also satisfying FTA requirements. As in past surveys, riders from all fixed routes and all providers will be surveyed. We expect to gather information about origin destination patterns and demographics from 26,000 riders. New for this survey, while the major survey work will be conducted in 2022, a pilot test will occur in 2021 that, in addition to testing sampling methods and materials, will also provide information on pandemic-era ridership patterns. The survey will also be expanded to include weekend ridership. An RFP was issued on January 11th, and 2 proposals were received and reviewed. The evaluation committee recommended that the ETC Institute be awarded the contract to conduct the onboard survey. The evaluation committee agreed that the proposal represented a best value to the council. The winning proposal also exceeded the DBE goal of 14%. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the regional administrator to enter into negotiations and to execute a subordinate funding agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation funding the travel behavior inventory transit onboard survey for an amount not to exceed $1,140,000 and to enter into negotiations and to execute a contract with ETC Institute to conduct the transit onboard survey for an amount not to exceed $2,100,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none. Liz, you may call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musse,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
and Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. All right, next up is the joint report of Environment and Community Development Committees, and we have Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try and get through this without assistance from my four-legged companion here. He's been pretty good, but it could happen at any time. The following business item is a comprehensive plan for a community connected to the regional wastewater system. Business item 2010-67JT, Savage 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The first item is it is to authorize the 2040 Comprehensive Plan for Savage and approve their comprehensive sewer plan. This item was heard in both the Community Development Committee and the Environment Committee, as Savage is a community that is connected to the regional wastewater system. Council staff found that the Savage 2040 plan conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. First, recommendations of the Community Development Committee are: 1, authorize the City of Savage to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. 2, advise the city to A, when available, provide the council the dates that each of the watersheds approved the local water management plan and the date the city adopted the final local water management plan. Council staff also requests that the city provide the council with a copy of the final adopted local water management plan that will be included in the final plan document that the city adopts. And B, implement the advisory comments in the review record for transportation, land use, and water supply. The recommendations of the Environment Committee are as follows. 1, approve the City of Savage's comprehensive sewer plan. 2, direct council staff to initiate discussions with the city related to the acquisition of the trunk sewer system that is to provide service to Credit River within 12 months after the local adoption of its comprehensive sewer plan. And 3, require the city to A, submit to the council a copy of the Big Sky Lift Station feasibility study, and B, submit to the council a copy of the intercommunity service agreement between the city and Credit River, once executed, that clearly define how costs associated with the municipal wastewater charges are to be collected or reimbursed by the two communities.
Thank you, Sue. Is there a second?
Second by Barber.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Musset,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
and Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you, and thanks for all those business items. We are now on to our information presentation, and I've really been looking forward to hearing this. It's hard to believe that it's been well over a year that we have been in a virtual space and tracking COVID and first testing, continuing testing, now vaccinations, and there is an increasing not just chatter, but conversation about the return to the workplace in whatever form, how our meetings go, the future of transit. There's a lot for us to consider, and at the heart of it is our own operation. And all this time, we've had an interim regional administrator. We've had an acting deputy regional administrator, Phil, who has really been managing a lot of our pandemic response. And I really appreciate, Phil, you're spending time with us today. So we're going to hear an update led by Phil Wasp-Jasper, but also Marcy Simon, our Director of HR, and Matt Latour, our Director of Program Evaluation and Audit. So Phil, Marcy, Matt, good to see you. We're going to have a presentation and have a chance for questions and a conversation. So take it away.
That's right, Mr. Chair. Thank you for those words. It is hard to believe it's been a year. Good afternoon, council members. As indicated, my name is Phil Wall-Jasper, and I'm the acting deputy regional administrator. And I'm happy to be here today with Matt Latour and Marcy Simon to provide an update as to the council's response to the pandemic. So what I'd like to do is just start with some background information to let you know what we had in place a year ago that led us to react the way we did and put us in a really good spot. So Greg, if you could go to the next slide, please. So you may have seen this before. This is the Met Council Incident Command Structure, and it is a part of our Continuity of Operations Plan, our COOP, and that's part of our business continuity business management team led by Kathy Matter and Lisa Belland. And this framework is modeled after FEMA, and they put out guidance after September 11th in 2001 that provided organizations a framework to respond in a coordinated way after the event of a crisis or some type of an incident. So we've been working on this for several years. This wasn't something that we put in place with the pandemic. It's something that took years to put together. We identified roles and responsibilities. We had training involved. And then it all came to a culmination about a year ago because we had to implement the full structure at the start of the pandemic, which we had never done before. And my role on this team is that of the incident commander. But as you can see, there are a lot of people involved, a lot of different groups working on this. A lot of people behind the scenes work on this as well. And the overall function of this team is really to come up with objectives as to how the council is going to respond to the pandemic, and then to put plans together that meet those objectives, and those plans being unique to the separate divisions that we have in the operations. And then we carry that out on the operations front. And it's supported along that entire way from, as you can see, several different groups there: communications, finance, procurement. So a lot of people have been putting this together, have been working on this over the past year and doing really, really good work. So Greg, if we can go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about some of those objectives and the phases of the response. And the first one, a year ago, we had to be in a position where we could continue our critical operations, but yet still abide by the emergency order to telework if you can telework. So it took a lot of coordination from a technology standpoint to make sure that our employees who could telework had the right equipment. But then we had to have the right personal protective equipment, and we had to make sure our facilities were set up in such a way to protect our on-site essential workers so that we could continue those services. We then turned to how do we manage the spread of COVID within the organization, and we looked at contact tracing and testing as two ways to help mitigate that spread, not only within the organization, but also within the community. We have a pretty robust contact tracing program and procedure in place. If there is an incident where there is a positive or a close contact, the employees know what to do. Communications has done a great job of getting that information out to our employees. And we have a way to get that word out to those who are close contacts so that they can quarantine pursuant to the guidelines from the state and the CDC. Testing is something we continue as well. We have the ability to conduct on-site tests and administer those tests. We just need to make sure that if we have suspicion that there might be a hotspot in a particular unit that might impact our critical operations, we can test quickly, get people quarantined quickly, and mitigate the spread. And again, those are something we're continuing to do. Those two items are something that we continue to do. The most recent phase was vaccinations, and the objective with that was we wanted to make sure that we had all of our employees had the opportunity to get a vaccine that wanted to. And we had a lot built into our command team, and a lot of groups behind the scenes were working on that. And I would say because of what we had in place, not only in terms of our response, but in terms of how we were able to communicate with our employees, communicate quickly, and get those that wanted to get vaccinated to a particular site in a relatively short period of time, we were able to partner with other public entities to put our employees, I would say, ahead of other organizations just because of that structure we had in place. And as Chair Zelli said, we're now looking towards returning to the office for teleworking staff. And then even beyond that, what will our work environment look like? And Matt's going to talk a little bit about that short-term phase, and Marcy will talk a little bit about the plans that are being undertaken for our long-term plan. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt.
All right, thanks, Phil, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. If we can move to the next slide, I can speak to some of the activities that, so actually today I was introduced as the Director of Audit, but in this capacity, I'm really talking to you today as the planning chief in the incident command structure. And really, what that really has meant, the way we've operationalized this is I sort of coordinate a group of planning chiefs that are represented across divisions. We meet bi-weekly and even more often than that recently to think one step ahead of operations and what's the next phase of the pandemic going to be and what do we need to have in place to be prepared for when that phase comes. So right now we're focused on that next step, which is to eventually bring our staff that have been working remotely back on site to the extent that we will in the future. Thinking about this not simply as saying, what are we going to come back to what we had in February of 2020, but whatever the next phase will bring. And Marcy's going to talk a little bit about how the organization is envisioning our future workplace to be. But our job is to sort of like bridge that gap and manage through the pandemic. We've put together a number of documents that have really guided this approach throughout the pandemic. The first on this list is a pandemic preparedness plan, and this was really initially drafted in terms of the workplace reset plan soon after the pandemic started, and developed, initially approved back in June of last year. And we've been updating as we've gone on. It's basically a plan that talks about all the different protocols at a high level that we have in place to make our workplaces as safe as possible, incorporating a lot of Department of Health guidance, and being consistent with what the state approach has been with this pandemic. We've helped manage and helped develop a series of emergency policies and procedures with many other stakeholders, things like temperature taking on approach to the building, masking, COVID leave, and really just being a place where we can share and make sure that those are discussed, socialized, and updated as they need to be within the divisions. Right now, we're really thinking about reviewing some of these documents as new guidance from the CDC rolls out and the Minnesota Department of Health. The state has put together a toolkit of guidelines for returning to on-site work for those people that have been offsite. I should meant to mention off the top that we're really talking about a fraction of our organization. If you think about us, it's a little bit less than 4,500 employees. Most of our staff have been on site throughout the pandemic, operating our bus system and making sure that our wastewater flow is treated every day. We're really talking about the 800 to 1,000, and Marcy can correct me on those numbers if I got them wrong, but staff that have been teleworking throughout the pandemic. The strategies we're going to put together is kind of updating what we've already put in place, creating better communication tools for staff to refer to and managers to identify how we're going to slowly roll back staff into the workplace and make sure that they continue to be safe. Allowing for some flexibility with divisions, recognizing that some of our big businesses, Metro Transit, Environmental Services, have had a lion's share of their workers have been on site throughout the pandemic, and the work is a little bit different. They're a little bit closer to operations, so there might be some need for flexibility in terms of timing with the divisions versus what we do at Robert Street, which might be more easily facilitated remote for a longer period of time. So the tools are listed below at the last bullet. Looking at updating our website, which again, I think we have a lot of this information out there. It's kind of pulling it together, make sure it's updated for the current state of the pandemic. Looking at things like scheduling tools to make sure that we can keep manage the flow of a hybrid work environment where some people might be in the office some days a week, to make sure that we can keep enough people in the office to ensure social distancing and things like that. Floor planning, and then making sure our signage is updated and our capacities within our facilities is adjusted. Next slide, please. So in this last slide, I'm going to speak to, I put together a timeline, and it might be a little bit hard to read, but that's probably okay because this sort of presumes some sort of crystal ball that I don't have, unfortunately. But I'm taking you all the way back to really, the planning goes all the way back, as I mentioned, to last year. But this year, we've really focused our energies in the early part of the year, vaccinations and facilitating, to the extent we needed to, getting our staff vaccinated. Now that most of our staff have had that opportunity, we're starting to think about these next phases. So in the next month or two, we'll be, as I mentioned, all the tools I talked about, the documents I talked about, we'll be updating those and getting communication out to our employees and their managers about how we're going to approach the June, July, August timeframe, which is when we think about, at least right now, as our sort of first step back into getting more and more people into the office on a regular basis. And what we're looking at is a very deliberate and slow rollout, really giving a lot of flexibility and maintaining that flexibility, keeping relatively low numbers, generally speaking, through the first phase of return. So we can learn a little bit about, especially for those people that haven't stepped foot in a building since last March, how it's going to work with some of our facilities. We're targeting fall for a more ambitious rollout of getting back to work, but I will say that that is, I think at this point, for us, a tenuous date at best. I mean, I think we, like everybody else, are looking at current state of the pandemic numbers and vaccination rollout, and kind of waiting and seeing, you know, and taking the lead from the state and from other, frankly, other businesses around the Twin Cities about what how fast they're returning their workers to on-site work. I put 2022, and again, this is one of those crystal ball things, but 2022 post-pandemic, I put that out there just because, you know, as we think about this from an incident command structure, at some point the pandemic will end, and we'll turn this, our incident command structure will dissolve. Hopefully that is sometime in 2022, but I think the point I want to make here is that the state has put out guidance to think about the pandemic as probably lasting through at least the end of the year, and that we should be thinking about deliberate approach and thinking about this this phase return probably through the end of 2021. So I just wanted to put that as kind of a benchmark in terms of when we're loosely thinking about the end of the pandemic right now. But obviously, as we have throughout this pandemic, we've been pivoting consistently and changing strategy depending on what's going on with COVID levels around the region. So I think that's about all I have, and I think Marcy is next to talk about longer term telework.
Thank you very much. Just a fun fact for everyone here on the call, in the meeting, I should say. 57 weeks. It's been 57 weeks. This is since we began working off-site. Kind of hard to believe. I don't know that any of us thought we would be here, right, that long. Matt mentioned the stats about people who were teleworking, and about 18% of the council workforce worked remotely during the pandemic or is currently, and that's about 755 employees. Next slide, please. So as we think about what will remote work look like for the council in the long term, and so the idea has been, if we can think about what it looks like in 2022, or, you know, hopefully a little sooner than that, then the planning chiefs will have a better chance to think about how to transition employees back into the office with that in mind. And we know that there's going to be some transitions and pivots along the way as this pandemic continues to develop and work its way through, and so too will we as an organization, as we begin to understand what it's going to be like to move back into space, what the issues will be space wise, what the guidance will be around masking and distancing. And so, but what I've been trying to do with my team and with input from the planning chiefs and others around the council is to think about what does the long-term picture look like. And I know that my HR colleagues around the city within the counties are also thinking about this. And we know that remote work is already and will be more widely accepted and supported by all organizations, not only public sector, but especially private sector. And we already see in job ads, you know, employers touting, you know, you never have to come on site, very flexible work arrangements to be living anywhere in the United States. Now, we don't have quite that broad of flexibility here at the council, but we know that in order to be a competitive employer and to retain our workers, we need to be more accepting and supporting of remote work. I'm anticipating that about 10 to 12% of our employees will be in a hybrid remote work arrangement post-pandemic. And that would be more than doubling the number of teleworkers than we had pre-pandemic. We had about 170 people who were in a remote work arrangement prior to the pandemic. And I think we're going to land somewhere at the 425 to 500 employee number by the time we are done with this. So I think it's important for us right now to think about why we're going to do this, how we will do this. I think that from an HR standpoint, I need to create a procedure a guidance document that allows enough flexibility in the organization to meet the varying needs across the organization. You know, from Metro Transit to environmental services to metropolitan transportation services, community development, RA, you know, we all have different kinds of work. We all have different needs for being on site, for being connected to customers. Even in regional administration, we need to be connected with our customers, who are those who work in the divisions and work on site. So we've got to be thinking about a way that we can both make remote work more accepted and supported, and provide flexibility and the ability to require on-site work too, so that we can meet our business needs. So it's that balance between the business need and employee needs and employee wants, frankly, right? One thing that will have to happen is a very fair job-related determination by managers in terms of who can telework and who can't. And I think that, you know, in the past we've been quite it's been okay for managers to just say, you know, I'm just not comfortable with any kind of remote work. I don't know how to manage that. I believe if I can't see my people, they're not going to be, I can't guarantee they're doing the work that they need to do. So I think that, you know, this is the culture change. However, the pandemic, of course, has gotten us to move along more quickly, as with many things, than maybe we had thought we would be. So, but we'll have to keep working on that to make sure that we have the culture and the support for managers and employees alike to be able to be openly, have open discussions about you know, how much remote work should I be doing? How much time do I need to be on site? You know, what are those critical interactions that really need to be face to face, and which ones don't need to be face to face? And what work really can be done better from a remote situation? Some of that very focused analytical work and so on. So the considerations we have for the long term will also be around available workspace and equipment investment. And so we've done some thinking about, and I will tell you that many locations across the council have, before the pandemic, had workspace challenges. So in some ways, as we think about remote work in the future, it should help us alleviate some of the workspace issues. So we're thinking about, you know, hotel space for employees who might be primarily working from home. And then we talk about shared office space for those who will be doing a hybrid. And then to what extent will workers be assigned a permanent cube or workspace that they, you know, they only use. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to create some a sort of a pattern for that, and I'll show you that in a minute. I do think that the last thing I want to say about this before I show you sort of the graph that we've put together is that department planning and training will really be needed to so that any department that's moving into this world where they've got a combination of on-site and remote work, you know, how does that work? Managers need to think about, you know, their meetings. When are people going to be on site? What's the schedule for who's on site when? And then also, what about the space needs? Who's sharing with whom? What kind of workspace do we need in our department? And how can we make sure that facilities is helping us get that workspace? So if you turn to the next slide, this gives you a little bit of a picture. And I always think a picture is worth 1,000 words. But this kind of gives you an example of what I think in the future will be looking like. You know, it's that on-site, 2 versions of hybrid and remote. So you think about where people primarily do their work, where do they spend their time when they're at work, how many days are they on site, and what kind of workstation setup do they have, and what kind of commitment has a council made to give people equipment for those different scenarios. So that's kind of where we're headed. This is still in draft form. I got feedback from some of my partners yesterday that I still want to incorporate, and I think this is starting to shape up into to be pretty much where we think we're going to be headed. So with that, I think we're through our slides and can take questions.
Sue Bento, go ahead. You may be muted.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
Marcy, if you could explain a little bit about the hotel. I didn't quite follow that.
Oh.
And to what extent that that might be used and the financial implications of that. And then secondly, I'm interested in whether there's been either formal or informal surveying with employees as to some of the challenges they faced, particularly folks, both men and women, but especially women, I think, challenges they faced with having their kids at home, trying to work, you know, just balancing it all. And if we haven't done surveying, if we will consider doing surveying going forward.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Vento, the concept of a hotel space is really, we call it, another word for them is a traveling cube. It would be a space in a work unit where, and if an employee is only in the office, you know, 1 or 2 days every pay period, it's just a space where there's a place, maybe there's a long counter where there's plugins for laptops and chairs, but it's very temporary. It's just a landing pad, if you will, for an employee. And oftentimes, you know, we would use spaces like that when we'd travel from location to location. And I know in human resources, we have staff at Haywood and at Robert. And so sometimes people would have to come to each other's offices. And so it's not a hotel per se, it's just really a space that's used. You'd probably in this scenario need to reserve that space, much like a conference room. I'm going to be using this space. I'll be in the office this particular day. So I don't think that it's an additional cost to the council, except that I think, you know, there of course is when you're reconfiguring floor plans and moving cubicle walls and you know, establishing barriers, if you will, there'll be a cost to that. But I think we do a fair amount of cubicle reconfiguring kind of in general as time goes on anyway. In terms of surveying employees, I'm going to turn that over to Matt, because I think Matt, the planning chiefs have all done some form of surveying of employees just about what their concerns are, especially as it relates to returning to work. And so Matt, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Sure, Councilmember Vento. The planning chief sent out a survey. We did it for Robert Street last summer, end of last summer, to gauge. At the time, it was more geared towards people's productivity, how they were feeling about telework, and how they were feeling about returning to on-site work. And the results were overwhelmingly positive in terms at the time, in terms of telework, that people felt like they were actually more productive in a remote setting. I mean, you know, other divisions have continued, like at different times, the ES or Metro Transit has done surveying of their employees. I know our information services team has done their own survey of their division. More recently, we've discussed resurveying our employees a couple different times, but we've also, you know, surveys have a kind of point in time analysis, and there's also a bit of granularity that sometimes people give you a response that, like, if I don't want to come back to work, I'm just saying really productive at home. And so there's a bit of like, you know, we've been trying to use other strategies in the meantime of like making sure that managers are talking to their employees on a regular basis, hosting town halls and having discussions where there's more of that instant feedback. We've done, you know, things that we've done in response. We had a number of people say that their setups at home weren't great. So early in the pandemic, people were allowed to take home chairs. Made an adjustment to our paid time for fitness. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Marcy, but program to also incorporate office equipment to make people's ergonomic situations better at home. I think your point about women's role and having primary caretaking of children is a real issue. I think for some of us, it frankly is in my household too. I mean, we have two working parents that both have demanding jobs, and we try to balance that on a daily basis. I think we'll probably look at some form of surveying in the next couple of weeks as we start to get back to work or identify people that want to come back to work. But I think we're also going to combine that with some approaches that are a little more interactive as well. So managers can have that frank discussion directly with their employees to see what needs they might have.
Other questions? Linnea.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. And just two things. One, I think it's really important to lean into the climate benefits of working remotely as a large organization like ours. And we have just had a conversation around how we're measuring our work around climate change. This to me could be one key metric and is very impactful, especially when you add up all of the different people involved with our committees and things like that as well. And so I think it's a real opportunity to leverage and talk about as a part of our climate change mitigation practices and value. So I just want to throw that out there. The pandemic has had a positive impact as it relates to climate fossil fuel utilization. And so I think figuring out how we can build on that and maintain that is a benefit that we should take credit for while we're doing it and measure it. The other thing I wanted to share is that back in 2008, with the downturn, a lot of public agencies were really struggling, right, for how to balance the books. And many of them turned to layoffs or furloughs. Hennepin County turned to a results-only work environment structure where they had their teams go remote as a way of saving money and preventing them from having to lay off employees. So I think that there's some really great examples of the acronym is ROWE, Results Only Work Environments, to really think about and use that knowledge that has been generated here. If you think back to 2008, that was smartphones were just barely out. So when you think of all the technology improvements we have today to aid in remote work that they didn't have then, and they've remained a result, some of their departments have remained a remote work. There's also huge benefits from a cost savings perspective. And when we look at our structural deficit issues, there can be real gains that can be met there. In addition to what we know about remote work, which is that you have 13%, I just read a study today about this increase in productivity compared to employees who work on site for lots of different reasons in addition to the climate benefits. So I just would encourage us to think about all the good reasons to become more flexible and nimble in this way. And I can't support enough the need to do good training and prep for managers and leaders around how this works. But there are really good already in place resources in some of our partner agencies that we can look to for real life examples that have been in place for almost 15 years now.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Question about the vaccinations. I'm just curious to know if there are any jobs where we will be requiring people to be vaccinated.
Mr. Chair and council members, we have all along been encouraging our employees to get vaccinated. We've been trying to get the resources out to them. We've been trying to give them the opportunities. We are not going to be requiring vaccinations. We will continue to encourage that. Trying to point out how the ease of it is now. I think the state just came out that for certain zip codes, there could be walk-up vaccinations at the state fairgrounds. So we'll continue that messaging, but to answer the question, we are not requiring anyone to get vaccinated.
Well, Go ahead, Sue.
What about mask wearing going forward in the work site, at least into 2022?
Well, Mr. Chair, I was just going to turn this over to Matt as a part of the
Yeah.
planning group, so I will let Matt respond to that.
Yeah, Councilmember Vento, we're closely monitoring all CDC and MDH guidance. We obviously are required to adhere to mask mandates from the state in terms of indoor indoor places. That's going to be our primary driver in terms of when we the decisions we make around mask wearing internally. At least that's what we're looking at right now. I think we're trying to follow the best science we have and the guidance we get from our state partners. It's a common question we get though, is will we be wearing masks in the building?
Go ahead, Sue.
Mr. Chair, to each of you and to all of the 4,000 staff, I just am in awe of the flexibility and the thoroughness with which you've handled those 57 weeks. And I think I can speak for my colleagues here on the council that you do us proud by this, and we're very, very grateful. And I especially appreciate this update tonight.
Well, I think we can all agree with that, and how much we've learned along the way, and how it continues to evolve. I really appreciate everything the staff has done, and including how quickly we've been able, from an IT point of view, just kind of accommodate. And as Councilmember Atlas Hickertson says, there's real benefits that we've found, both in efficiency but also access, that we've had great attendance. And I think one of the things and trade-offs we will have to weigh is what we gain and what we maybe are giving up. And I just recently heard a lecture from Miles Schaefer at the Carlson School, who talked about some of the results, that there are certain work assignments which are much greater efficiency, but there's areas, particularly in innovation, idea exchange, creativity, where proximity actually really matters. So, and I think as we march forward, we ought to make sure we're gaining and not losing, and we're going to learn. And one of the areas I think we have to be thoughtful about is some of our own committee meetings, and including our council meetings. And and I think the point has been made in the past that not only is it a carbon footprint savings, but we allow people who come long distances in our advisory committees to be able to actually participate. So that's a really important sensitivity, and yet again, that kind of exchange, even among us, that we often are missing through the before meeting, after meeting, and maybe as we think about this, we will try perhaps maybe a hybrid of how we manage our meetings, not hybrid of a particular meeting, because that's also challenging, but maybe some meetings are in person, some meetings are virtual. I think we should all be thinking about that, and if you have good thoughts, or as we learn from other agencies, we will certainly be able to understand what a best practice really is. And I think I really appreciate Phil and your team's work in analyzing and thinking about both the trade-offs, the efficiencies, the risks, but I think also for all of us to kind of, as we conduct our lives, kind of think about what's working well and what's not. And I think I like the idea that we're not going to be abrupt about it. We're not doing this really quickly, but we're starting the deep thinking. And of course, anybody's thoughts or learnings, we should really be open to hear from all of us and all of you as we march ahead. Judy, you have a thought?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it just kind of dovetails into what Councilmember Vento said and what everybody is saying. But I do want to just give a deep appreciation and thanks to the people that have come into this, pandemic plan structure, because of course they're doing their regular duties as well. And all of these hats that they're wearing, especially Mary Bogey, but certainly all of them. They are to be highly commended for keeping all the work streams going and leaning into, this uncharted water and trying to figure out, how do we get there and what do we do? I mean, it just goes to show what a great group of people we have working at Met Council and stepping into additional leadership roles. And I just have high confidence in what they're doing, and all of you, thank you so much. I know this has been really hard. And I also just want to say that as we all see in the different places we're showing up and where we work, and everywhere, people recognizing that as human beings, I hope that everybody's taking what they need in the moments they can to just do whatever you need to continue on with your health and well-being, because nothing's more important than that either. And if there are things that you need, or especially on the backside of this, the key learnings, but certainly if there are things you need, we're here, and we, of course, through our great chair, want to be helpful, supportive, and responsive to you, so you have the resources you need. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, everybody. And we've learned a lot, but it has been a hard year. I mean, we need to acknowledge the stresses that everybody has felt, not least of which was our acting regional administrator, Mary Bokey. Mary, did you have something to say on this?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Right now we're focusing kind of on the planning and return to work and things like that, but I just wanted to point out just the work that's been done early in this process, and that really fell to the operations chiefs. And so they're still active in this command as well, but Brian Funk in Metro Transit, in keeping that essential work moving and that service going in an on-site environment. Craig Edlin, Heather Augustin-Hebner, Jerry Sutton, working with our transit providers to continue that work and really bringing them in to our vaccinations and things like that, so that we would make sure that our contractors were delivering our service, had their needs met for PPE and things like that. IT as well. We have this environment that we stepped up and got everybody out of the office within a 2-week time frame, and we just really ran them out. But there's a lot of work we're doing behind the scenes to keep this virtual environment going. And as we look to what do we look like in the future, we kind of have to rebuild some of that as well, because we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes just to make sure that these meetings go off really well, and that we continue to be able to have the virtual meetings that we have. So I don't want to forget about all that work that was done while we're focusing on the work that we have yet to do.
The only other thing I'd add, and I kind of learned this morning with the business community breakfast, that we kind of expected the opening of the economy to kind of be a gradual straight line, and that's not likely. I think it's going to be kind of flat for a while, maybe come up, and maybe during the summer it might not be robust, but we might have more leisure activities, more recreational activities, but work activities might really almost be the fall. So anyway, I just kind of think about that straight line that we always have in projections. We're going to kind of see as we go. Any other thoughts on this subject? Well, Phil, Marcy, Matt, thank you so much, and thank you for what you're continuing to do. That was really an update, but I know you're continuing to be studying and working on it. So we're again, thank you for all that. And I know I just have a couple other quick items and some reports. One, based upon a robust conversation with the climate presentation, we are in the process of standing up a climate action working group to be kind of our fourth working group, and it's going to be chaired by Peter Lindstrom. But you'll be hearing from me soon to ask for those that are interested. We want to help kind of identify those that have expertise, but also those that are not on another work group, to kind of give it opportunity for some of this generative conversations we've been having in work groups, which I think are really a great opportunity for us as council members to be engaged in a less formal but really substantive way. So stay tuned for that. The other is just a kind of a heads up, and I feel compelled that we need to at least make a comment that there was an article in the Pioneer Press. I'm not sure how many people subscribe to the Pioneer Press. I do, but I have to say I don't read it cover to cover every day, and now it's virtual. But they actually had an article about a Ramsey County committee meeting yesterday, and the headline was something about how the Met Council came asking for emergency funding and were denied or was tabled. And I just want to clarify that that actually is not true. And we are talking to Pioneer Press and asking for a retraction. But there was a tabling what is an ongoing program of annual operating grants to support the Green Line. And no mystery, there's a little tension with counties with the governor's proposal to require counties to cover some of the capital maintenance costs deep into the future in many cases. And that was something we continued to have a conversation about. So we're actually going to set up a time for a future committee of the whole this next month to really look at the broad picture of our transit infrastructure and how it's funded in the future, and kind of what some of those unfunded gaps are, and kind of give an opportunity to kind of get a little deeper into understanding as we advance all these lines, what's really going on from a financial point of view and from a who's doing what point of view. But as maybe many people know, that these guideways, the light rail systems, the blue line, the green line that are operating, are actually funded by a combination of the counties who help it be the local funding partners to advance the work to build them, and then the federal government, but certainly the state funds a piece of the operation. So roughly in the green line, let's just pick on that, it is funded 50% by a combination of Ramsey and Hennepin County, and roughly 50% from the state, really through general fund appropriations to Met Council. So this is all subject to kind of a master operations and funding agreement that has a long in duration, kind of lays out who does what. And but it is kind of an annual grant that the counties give to cover the operations of the light rail. We submit an application every year, done it since it began, and the counties kind of fund that share. We, in this case, put together the application in November. There were no questions. It's within the guidelines of the master agreement. But there's a little tension with counties, so they actually have not funded it, nor has Hennepin County for 2021. So we are now in a negative cash flow because we're continuing to operate the trains, and the counties are not funding the operating grants at this point. Now, they've tabled it, but I just want to clarify that, and we'll give a larger conversation about this, but that news article about us kind of coming because of our troubles and that they were asked to bail us out, that actually is not true. They've been full funding partners all along. And because of this, I'm calling it a conversation, but others call it different words, but there's definitely tension about how do we manage the funding of our light rail systems going forward. And and maybe because of the legislation, they have tabled the operating grants. And we'll see if we can get that clarified in the news. It's not going to be resolved in a matter of days. I'm not losing any sleep over it, but we clearly have a Met Council point of view or a state point of view. But I think this is just something we need to work out with our counties partners, and I can go deeper into the weeds, but I just want to give you kind of a heads up in case you hear about that. I don't know if Mary, you want to add anything to that little overview? You might be muted. You might intend to be muted.
I think you covered it really well, Mr. Chair. Our master funding agreements are 5 years in length, and we're in year number 4. So for the other years, they have approved this each time. Prior to this master funding agreement, we had one before that as well. That was of length as well. So this is nothing new. It shouldn't have been a surprise to the county, as it comes off in the title of the news article. And we'll just keep working through it with them.
Yeah, Deb Barber, you're very familiar with the situation. Anything you want to add to this? Or?
No, I thought you covered it very well, and I'm glad you brought it up because I think there were several things that weren't factual, and so it's good to get it out there and make sure all of our council members understand how this structure works, and that we weren't asking for something exceptional, but really part of our routine business that we do with the county.
And I think, stay tuned because we'll have a deeper conversation about the whole puzzle coming forward in a few weeks. Sorry, was that you, Phil, who asked a question? Sorry.
Oh, I think it was me.
Oh,
Mr. Chair,
it was you,
I also
Mary.
just,
sorry.
yes, I also just wanted to add that Terry Dressen, our communications director, is reaching out to the Pioneer Press, to the reporter, has already done so. So we're working on a fix to their headline there. And while they covered some of the facts, they really didn't cover what the real story was. So I think the reporter just kind of missed and got things confused with some other issues.
Any questions on that? All right, Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not really a question, really. It's more of an observation. I'm glad you brought this up as well. And I think your summary and Mary's summary is really important. I'm looking forward to having a deeper conversation for all of us to understand. But I think, and it's really unfortunate that non-factual information gets posted in the press. That's really unfortunate. I think hopefully what will come from this, though, is that it comes into the public realm for discussion, because this should not be an issue that comes up and penalizes the Met Council and puts us in a precarious position over and over and over. It's something that people need to understand, and hopefully with more discussion and with more transparency and more people understanding that this system isn't magic. It doesn't just pay for itself and take care of itself. We're all partners in operating this and in building this and in having this robust system. So hopefully the good that will ultimately come out of this is more discussion, and that the understanding that there is really a need to address this in a permanent way instead of kicking the can down the road. So that is my hope, and I look forward to a deeper discussion sometime at a work session.
Thanks, Molly. And as vice chair, Molly Cummins has been very involved, and particularly with many of you with the Blue Line or the Green Line extension. So it's good. I think all of us come together and we'll kind of get a level setting as to kind of where we are. But thanks for that. And does anybody else have any other reports on this or other subjects? Let's see. How about you, Mary? Anything else you'd like to report?
I'll pass from here.
No, I see Anne. How about Anne? Anything from the General Council?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a tension between the technology we've been using and what we've been able to do to conduct meetings and the open meeting law, which, while it had a section on pandemics, no one ever thought we were going to have to use it. And so going forward, there's a lot of analysis that we need to do, and it's really kind of fact specific, whether it's a council meeting, a committee meeting, an advisory committee meeting, does the open meeting law apply? So I just want you to know we understand how important it is to people to be as flexible as we can. We're also limited by the open meeting law, and so we have to weigh both of them carefully to get to the proper results, since violations of the open meeting law fall on you all. not on the lawyers or the staff. So just letting you know, we are looking at it, we're working on it, and hopefully the open meeting law will continue to catch up with technology and the current situation that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's always helpful to have a general counsel keep us as much as possible walking on the right legal path. Well, if there's no other words, it is a beautiful day, and as near as I can tell this spring, when it's nice outside, we should take advantage of it because it won't last long. So, with that note, everybody have a good day and a good week, and I will certainly see you soon. This meeting is adjourned. Bye bye.